On part 2 of 2, I sit down with Stu Jay Raj to critique a conversation I had with a Thai friend in Thai.
So if you want to dive back into the fascinating nuances of colloquial Thai, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to train for a Muay Thai fight. But the first time I got kicked in the ribs, I decided that podcasting was more my speed.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 23 years ago. Fell in love with trying to correctly pronounce the Thai words for the numbers 11 and 18. And I'm still trying, so I've never left.
I remember we talked about this a while ago, and you said that really made you mad, even after so many years of being here. But now you've come around.
I've got a new attitude. It's a challenge. I'm looking at everything as no. I mean, it's since we've been doing these Thai language shows, just it brings up these memories, and it's weird because I do think I have gotten better in some ways, but it's so frustrating when a problem you had 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you have it again.
Right,
it's like it never feels like it's totally behind you.
It's like, oh, I've been treading water for a quarter of my life. Awesome.
That's right.
It's like when I play chess with my son and he kicks my ass. I feel like, oh man.
Well, you tell yourself you're doing it for him.
That's right. Playing left-handed.
You could beat him if you wanted to.
Right.
All right. We want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get every episode a day early, behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, a heads up to send questions to upcoming guests, and access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. On this week's bonus show, we chatted about some new winter boots that Greg ordered that had to be specially couriered in from the USA by our buddy Ash, thoughts on the very enjoyable meetup we had a couple weeks ago, and our reaction to the awful shooting at Paragon Shopping Mall and what it says about gun culture, the media, and mental health in Thailand. To learn how to become a patron, click the support button at the top of our website.
Yeah, and also we want to mention our first Bangkok podcast listener survey. Now, we were talking with our buddy Zach a while ago, and he asked us a few questions about our audience demographics, and we realized we didn't really know much. So we set up a Google form with a few questions that will give us some insights into who is listening, how they're listening, and where they're listening from. So we put a link on our Facebook page, and there's a link in the show notes for this episode as well. So please, dear listener, if you have a few minutes, please let us know a little bit about yourself and fill out the form. It's totally anonymous, no emails collected, etc., etc. But it'll be really interesting to know who's listening out there, and we'll go over that in a future show.
For sure. Yeah, please do it. We don't ask much of our listeners in terms of this type of stuff. And we've basically pretty much never done this before. So I'm really curious to see the results. So please, it's 5 minutes or less.
Yeah. I got tired of going, I don't know, when someone asked me a question. How many of your listeners are blah, blah, blah? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. All right, well, this episode is part 2 of 2, an in-kind sequel to episode 20, wherein Ed sat down with our buddy, linguist Stu Jay Raj, to critique a recorded conversation that Ed had in Thai. Many kudos, Ed, for going first, but now the inevitable time has come for me to put my worst foot forward and get my own conversation critiqued. So I recorded a quick chat with my friend Tong, which Stu loaded up into his fancy linguistics software so we can go through it, talking about all the things I said wrong, tried to say right, and just avoided saying completely. So this is a really cool show to listen to if you're learning Thai. Lots of good feedback. We're not going to play the whole conversation I had with my friend again, just for the sake of timing. But if you missed last week's episode and want to hear that, you have to go back to the previous episode, episode 59, and listen to that. It starts at the 10-minute and 30-second mark. So once you do that, come back here and you'll be all caught up. So here is my chat with our buddy, Stu Jay Raj.
So coming back to those first examples, ตอน เมื่อ and เวลา a three-way, and samai is another one, three ways of pointing out time where we may use the word when in English. But in Thai, there are actually four different usages where we get the usage of when in
Wow.
English.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
And who's going to tell you that? Like, when you're learning, native Thai speakers won't even realize that when they're speaking, or that they use this, because they may not have that level of English, or may not even thought about it.
Well, this is something that I talk about a lot. And when I ask my wife, for instance, hey, what's tone do we use with this high level thing in this context? And she goes, I don't know. I just know that we do. I don't know why. And it works the same way for me as an English speaker. When I was teaching, air quotes around teaching, someone would say, why do we use this like this? And I would just say, I don't know. It's just, that's the way that we do it. So I think, to be a teacher or a linguist like yourself is a very specialized skill, and not everyone can do it.
Yeah, and I think it's a nerdy thing, I guess. And I actually gave a presentation just before COVID in Fukushima, not Fukushima, Fukuoka, to 600 polyglots. And my thesis was that while we're all in here, we can all talk about this stuff. But you've got to admit that we're probably all somewhere on the spectrum, and thinking to language to this degree is probably not a normal thing, and doesn't go down well in a party.
Right.
And like the levels that we think about language and meaning and nuances and stuff is just not normal a lot of the time for people who are learning language to this level. I try and harness that on my wife's suggestion, especially in public. I've got the injured shins to prove it, because whenever I start going down, I'll get a kick under the table to know to shift gears from nuance in meaning to go to something that's more socially acceptable.
Yeah, I used to work with a woman years ago, and we were talking about Star Wars, and she asked me if Luke Skywalker's father was Dark Vader. And I nearly lost my mind, but of course I realized that most people don't care the Dark and Darth, So.
Yes, especially in today's climate.
That's right.
But yeah, I can imagine. But it's the same sort of thing. So I've learned to sort of suppress that in public. But when I really get into the language side of things personally, you go into nuance of meaning. But it's not the normal thing that people are going to think of. With what I've done is, if people are up to talking about language, as we are doing right now, great, I can bring these kinds of things out.
Yeah.
And hopefully inspire people to start thinking about ththese kinds of things when you're learning. But it's not the normal thing that you're going to be thinking of. There's another instance there, and it was the use of yeah. And I think you've used it in here, chai. And I think this is a good point to mention. I think I've mentioned it maybe before in your clip, but Thai does not have a word for yes.
That's a big, bold statement. I want to learn more about that.
So the word chai does not mean yes. And I would ask anybody who would like to challenge that, let's do it. The word chai literally means it is. I'll give an example. Would you like a cup of tea? You would not say yes to that. You would not say chai to that, because chai means it is. Let's put this into English. Would you like a cup of tea? It is. That does not make sense. Right. So what are you saying when you would like a cup of tea? Would you like a cup of tea? If you say yes, that literally means I would like a cup of tea. So the way that we do affirmative in Thai, as with many other languages, is that you repeat the verb. And so what's the verb? รับน้ำรับชาไหม รับ means to receive, ชาไหม รับครับ I would like to receive it. Or you could just say ครับ which actually literally means ขอรับ may it be received what you've said. รับชาไหม รับครับ. Some people may say ดื่มชาไหมครับ but actually รับชาไหมครับ is probably more common. ดื่ม to drink, so you could say ดื่มครับ or รับครับ to receive it. But notice that it's the verb that puts it into the positive, which is yes. If I wanted to say no, I would say ไม่รับครับ not then the verb to receive. It's not ใช่ What ใช่ literally means is to be, like to be or not to be. And so the reason why people will say it means yes, say, this is your bottle of Coke. ใช่ไหม ใช่ it is or is not. ใช่ it is. Because they've put that tag at the end of it is, isn't it? It is. ใช่
Okay. Interesting.
So that's like a yes-no question. It's a closed question. But if you were asked a question like กินข้าวไหม กิน you wouldn't say กินข้าวไหม ใช่ That doesn't make sense.
Okay. Earlier in the conversation, when I said Kun Tong been moving to make up, could he have said chai? I am. It is.
That could be inferred. So that may be okay. So คุณไทยเป็น movie nerd ใช่ไหมครับ ใช่ Because the question isn't you are a movie nerd. It is ใช่ไหมครับ So the ใช่ is it ใช่ or not ใช่ ใช่ If it's not ใช่ ไม่ใช่
Okay.
But ใช่ is actually the question because you've made that the focus of your question. But you could say คุณทองเป็น movie nerd เหรอครับ He could just say cup and that would just mean just as much. He could infer ใช่ไหมครับ at the end of it and say ใช่เป็น movie nerd. Yes, it is. But this is one of these outlying ones. The general rule of thumb is if you want to sound more natural, use ใช่ a lot less as a foreign learner of Thai and try and start implementing realizing what the verb is and putting that back as your affirmative message or putting ไม่ and then whatever it is, or just saying ครับ as an affirmative statement.
That's a really good exercise to keep in mind because that also forces you to listen more and parse what they're saying and give it back to them.
Yeah, and the cool thing about it is that it's almost like the word like อะไร what เมื่อไหร่ when ใคร who, these I words, which would be our WH words in English. They will say those in the question, and you can say exactly the same flow that they said in their question, but just throw in the answer where that I word was, and you'll sound native. อยากกินอะไร อยากกินข้าว So อยากกินอะไร what do you want to eat อยากกินข้าว I want to eat rice or food อยากกินอะไร อยากกินปลา I want to eat fish เขาจะไปเมื่อไหร่ เขาจะไปพรุ่งนี้ when's he going to go เมื่อไหร่ เขาจะไปพรุ่งนี้ he's going to go tomorrow. So you can basically use the exact same rhythms that are thrown at you and subbing those question words out, putting the answers in, and you'll sound much more natural.
Nice. Good to know.
So I've got queued up here actually a position where you've used the word chai, where it fits perfectly naturally in English, but in Thai, it's probably not what would be said. Have a listen.
A Nightmare on Elm Street.
A Nightmare on Elm
The
Street.
original one.
Thai. Okay, so you're asking, what are your favorite horror movies? A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original one. And you said Chai. Now I get it in English saying, yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome movie.
Right.
Chai.
Right.
So that yeah is again the sound envelope from yeah needs to fit over something in Thai. What would it be? Chai. And actually gives the right tone to it as well. The thing is though, it's not what would be said in Thai.
Okay.
What would be said in Thai for that yeah would be no.
Really, is that an actual word? I've always assumed that was just sort of like a or uh-huh.
Like no or no. So โอ้มันสนุกมากเนอะ no. This no is like yeah I agree with you, isn't it? All in one tiny little particle. No.
Oh, really? I had no idea it carried that much weight.
Yeah, it's kind of like a na on steroids. No. It's this empathetic. I feel with you. You feel with me, right? This is what we agree on.
Oh, wow. That's good to know. I had no idea.
So, for example, if I said, this food is delicious, you went to someone's house and they made you a meal, I don't know, that's like, I know we're all feeling it. It's good, isn't it?
Can I use it to agree with someone? Like if they're like, oh, that food was delicious, could I just say, no?
Yeah, it's like, of course it was. I feel it. We all know that it was delicious. If somebody saw something really sad happen and they said, "Nah, sometimes, oh, that's what a, I feel sorry for that person," you could say, "No." That shows that you have the empathy for that person is displaying as well.
Wow, that's good to know. I'd never been exposed to that before.
Yeah, which is very different from na. Na is kind of like the Japanese ne. This one ne. So this one na. So if somebody said, "This is delicious," and you said na, and versus no, that's really funny thinking about that. This is delicious, na. It's almost like a challenge. It is, isn't it? What? It should be something different to that. I guess it could be interpreted a bunch of different ways, but if you said no, it's like, yeah, it really is.
Okay, great to know. Cool.
Yeah, they're different. That's interesting. This is a very good display of that. Let's just have another last listen.
A Nightmare on Elm Street.
A Nightmare on Elm
The
Street.
original one.
Chai. So not Chai, but no. Yeah, that was an awesome movie.
I am a big fan of that first movie.
Here's another one that's interesting. Now, again, this is another sound invert from English. Say this for me. The word year. B. So you can see B, and then the voice naturally decays. B. And so when I was 12, ตอนอายุ12 or อายุ12 B, when I was 12 years old. Now listen to this. เวลาผมอยู่อายุ12 ปี เวลาผมอยู่ when I was at, which again, that's the wrong usage of you, but we're looking at the word 12 years old. 12 ปี. Have a listen to this again. อายุ12 ปี. อายุ12. Now, your P, your popla, actually had a bit too much aspiration too, so it sounded like P, which would be also ghost. Maybe that
12 ghosts
was in there. Yeah, so when I was 12 ghosts, but let's listen to the again. อายุ12 ปี. Yeah, and just to show you, because I can actually see it on my spectrogram here. You can hear that P. So there's aspiration should be non-aspirated. B, and your tone, if you saw what I'm seeing on my spectrogram, is going up B, B. I used to song sip song B. So that's really important. Just a little word like age or years, sip song B and sip song P, are totally different to the Thai mind, to the Thai subconscious. 12 ghosts versus 12 years.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind. And even though you've been here, and I know you know the difference between an aspirated versus a non-aspirated P, when you get into the flow of it, sometimes those distinctions aren't made.
Yes, I very distinctly know the difference easily, but it's easy just to steamroll right past them when you're speaking quickly.
Yeah, and honestly, 90% of the time you get them spot on. It's just sometimes that it doesn't. ของเพื่อน วันเกิด 12 วันเกิด นั่นแหละเป็นกวนมากแต่ชอบมากด้วย และผมกลับบ้านก็บอกว่าแม่มีไทป์ไรเตอร์ไหมครับ This word here ก็บอกว่าแม่บอกว่า should be บอกว่า both of those are long.
Yeah, I sound like foghorn leghorn trying to sound like a chicken.
บอกว่า so it's บอกว่า. There's another thing that you do through this, which is something I hear a lot happen. I know a lot of people learn this particle หรอครับ really จริงหรอ
Sure, yeah.
It can be said by males and females. A lot of the time, you'll hear maybe females using it more. จริงหรอ Like, really? And a lot of the time, guys start to overuse it. And overuse it almost sounding either maybe effeminate or just not using it in the right place. And so have a listen to this.
ประเทศไทยเพิ่งจะมีเรทหนัง
So Thailand is only recently started to have a rating system for movies.
เมื่อประมาณ10 ปีที่แล้ว
From about 10 years ago. 10 ปีละ la. So this law, again, you almost got it in where it would be used. It's like the jing law, spi law, and I've heard you a few times in this clip use the law particle. But law is almost said with a limited sense of disbelief.
Okay.
To be law, 10 years, really? I guess it's also in the way you would say it. But if you said, we've only had it for 10 years, แค่10 ปีเหรอครับ หรือ 10 ปีเหรอครับ I guess maybe that cup may have just would help to make it more of a emphatic statement or real sort of surprise rather than questioning whether it is or not.
The way that I learned it was that Jingra is roughly equivalent to, oh yeah, or oh really?
Yeah, again, it's the use of particles. You're getting it within one meaning, but then this law is the actual thing doing the hard work of sprinkling meaning.
Okay.
And so if you can detach the use of law and then start using it in other areas, then you get more control over your meaning. So yeah, Jing Law could use that, but you could just say, "Look up, 10 ปีเหรอ 10 years, really?" The meaning doesn't feel as like in the same way that a Thai would use the same particle.
Okay.
I'm trying to put my finger on what it is.
ประเทศไทยเพิ่งจะมีเรทหนังเมื่อประมาณ10 ปีที่แล้ว
10 ปีเหรอ
เมื่อ10 ปีที่แล้ว
And you've said 10 ปีละ law. It should be more law. And I think this is the thing with your North American, I say I say law, you say law. And so this aw has had a subconscious shift to this ah vowel, which happens across English accents, but you can't do it in Thai.
Okay, interesting. Well, one thing that's come out of this is that we're often taught, I wouldn't say the wrong way to say things, but maybe a rigid way to say things. And I think it's an interesting concept that a lot of times we are taught safe Thai. Foreigners are not given the slang or the street Thai or something like that, which I think can kind of do us a disservice.
Yeah, and there's a difficult line to draw because I see some people think they get it and then they go and say something, maybe they're in a more formal setting and they'll say something that really shouldn't be said there and they destroy their image or other people's image. And so it's probably better to stay safe. However, in doing that, a lot of people might think that that's the only way to say things, or it might be an unnatural way to say things, but safe. So it's important to realize that there's never just one way of saying things. And if you really, really want to feel that way that native speakers of any language feel, you just have to live the language. And that means get out of your family bubble too, because I imagine you might use it at home, whatever, but just put yourself in a whole bunch of situations where you would use it. Go and join Toastmasters in Thai. Or I found when I was a Dale Carnegie trainer, we were running these training sessions day in, day out in Thai, just listening to story after story after story, and you start getting in it. You can't help but then have these nuances of meaning just embed themselves into you, to the point now I have no idea where I learned some words or some meanings or why I know the nuance of some meanings, but I feel it. And the same with Indonesian or Chinese, but I can tell you little nuances of even like facial expressions or breaths that you would do within Indonesian. Say the word for Indonesian, if I say means yes. And when I'm speaking Indonesian, and this will be that's just a normal way of saying yeah, as opposed to which is no. And just in the flow of things, those things happen. And I don't know when it embedded itself into me, but it just feels totally natural. So you've got to be in the language to get it into you.
This is probably my biggest rule that I ignore, is that you need to force yourself out of your comfort zone, and you need to have conversations with taxi drivers and street vendors, and beyond the usual give them directions or order my favorite food. And it's not easy. It's much easier to put on your headphones and listen to a podcast in the back of a taxi, or to just sort of look at your phone. But again, you're doing yourself a disservice. You need to force yourself into a Thai environment to pick up on those little nuances.
Even go beyond the taxi driver or noodle vendor, because you don't want your language to be locked into that level as well. Maybe many of the taxi drivers they're speaking Isan to you, or they have a different dialect that's influencing their language. So find the level of the language that you want to speak and immerse yourself with those people.
That's great advice. Well, Stu, we're coming up on our time here. Thanks again so much for ripping my conversation apart. It was all really good advice, and I got some very good takeaways from that. And again, I think just a simple act of recording yourself speaking Thai for our listeners, it's a really eye-opening experience.
Yeah, and for this clip, like, we only got the tip of the iceberg on the gold that was in your specimen there, because there were a lot of things that can be learned from. I actually showed you a clip where I went through and analyzed it in real time, but it takes a long time to do the whole thing. But only through doing this too and getting native speakers to listen and seeing like a mirror, you'll be able to really improve it.
Yeah. Well, again, man, thanks so much. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about Stu Jay Raj?
Yeah. So, of course, Jacademy, JCADEMY.com. That's where I keep all of my stuff there. I'm running a tech company during the day, so this stuff is sort of all running on the side. But as you know, language is my passion. So you can go through and jump in and see all the resources and things there. And now that things are under control on the sort of the work front there, I'm trying to get some time where maybe I'll be able to run some live workshops or something here and there. But the best way, just go to jacademy.com and you'll see stuff. And of course, YouTube. There's a gazillion clips out there.
Cool. All right, man. Thanks again. Look forward to our next meeting. And everyone, check out Stu online.
Thank you.
You know, obviously I mentioned this last week, but man, his precision in his advice is incredible. It's like the way he can just zoom in on small things. I mean, it's kind of like what I was just saying with the intro. It's like something like sip et and sip bat. It's just getting it exactly right. Apparently, in my case, it takes more than 20 years.
That's right. That's right. And also, too, we've got a really cool picture, too, that we'll include in the email to patrons. But it's a screenshot of the software that Stu uses to analyze people's voices. And
right. Very cool.
Yeah, you can see my waveform there. And, dude, like, he was showing me, he's like, you see here, this is where your throat is closed. And it's like a little bump in the waveform. And it's like, and this is where your tongue is touching the top of your mouth. Like, he gets right into the details. I love it.
Well, you know, obviously you did this, you know, conversation with him, but the next time I get a chance to talk to him, I want to get an update from him because a few months ago we were talking about like how we could possibly use AI, and he was telling me this idea he had for software that involves almost like being inside someone's mouth. So you could actually see someone's mouth making sounds or I don't know. He was trying to describe it to me. But he's you know, you and I have joked about him before that he's kind of a mouth engineer.
Ooh, that's a good way to put it.
He's just very much into physically what's going on in your mouth when you enunciate. Like he knows exactly everything you need to do to make a certain sound, and it's just he can just zoom in on it. Like that's, you know, because he did it to me, and then listening to your interview with him, it's like he's doing it again. He's just going to zoom in.
I could just see Stu's software, like he's, you know, a half a millimeter tall inside someone else's mouth, and it's got this massive tongue undulating over top of him, and he's pointing
Seriously,
stuff out.
No, it's something like that. No, he's gonna be standing inside someone's mouth. I think it's gonna be something like that.
All I know is I got to go down to MBK and make some business cards that say mouth engineer on them. I'm wondering what doors that can open.
Stu Jay Raj, mouth engineer.
Well, thanks, Stu. We really appreciate it, man. It's always great talking to you. I know our listeners like it a lot too. And like we said, it's more than just the vocabulary. It's also the cultural nuances and the historical nuances of the language too that he knows all about. That is impossible to know unless you get out there and talk. So
that's right. I mean, I mentioned this last week. It's not just the mouth engineering. It's a lot of it is social context and word choice. You know, so from, you know, I don't teach English, but just from all my years being in university and grading exams, and I often talk to my students. I just call it word choice, where they you know, they use a word that's close, but it's just not the word a native speaker would use
Right.
to express that idea. You know, it's some nuance of meaning. And I think Stu's very good at that as well, you know, where he just says, that's not how a Thai person would say that.
I realized how stupid English was the other day, too, when someone asked me the difference between, here's a form, fill it in or fill it out. I'm like, that's the same thing. But they're like, they're two completely, like those words are diametrically opposed. Well, it's the same thing. Don't ask me.
English has a bunch, English, just, even though, again, I'm not an English teacher, but just answering questions from students, I run into problems like this a lot, where English, I think, does not make sense. It's you know, parts of it make sense, but it's such a agglomeration. Is that a word?
It is now. But why not? English makes up words and steals words all the time.
It's such a conglomeration. I don't know what the right word is. I feel like English is a combination of 5 or 6 different languages, and that's why it doesn't make sense.
It's a mutt.
So the bottom line is, I think Thai makes more sense than English. I think it does.
Stu's way on top of this. He loves Thai. He says once you figure out all the rules, he goes, Thai is a beautiful lyrical language that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Okay. So so we're on. I think it's true. I think it's less. Obviously, Thai has multiple influences from Khmer and maybe some from Burmese, and obviously Sanskrit and Pali. So every language is probably a mutt. But I think English is more of a mutt. Than Thai.
Chief mutt.
Yeah, we'll have to Ricker and Stu comment on that. But I think English is more of a mutt than Thai.
All right, fair enough. Anyway, thanks again, Stu. Always great to talk to you, and we'll have you back on the show again soon.
For sure.
All right, we ask our listeners to send us a voicemail using the little microphone button on our website if they have something to say. And this week we heard from Kat, so let's listen into what she had to say.
Hey there, my name is Kat. I love your podcast so much, and I'm thinking about moving to Thailand middle of next year. And I was wondering, I know in the past you did an episode about the Indian culture that is in Thailand. Another, I guess, minority group or subculture are the Muslims of Thailand. And I was wondering if you could do an episode about that. I think that'd be very interesting. All right, thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks for that, Kat. I think that's a very good idea. In fact, I want to do a series. Greg and you and I have been talking about this. Because we have so many different listeners, and we've met so many different people in Thailand that, you know, we've never done a show on what is it like to be African American in Thailand. We've never done that.
Right.
Or we've never done a show on what it's like to be Jewish in Thailand. But then again, before we do those, we should probably do something on what it's like to be Muslim, since Muslims are a minority in Thailand, but not like 1 in a million. You know, it's like it's a significant population that has historical roots. It's not some new population. And so I agree. I like her suggestion.
Yeah, me too. And it's actually a continuation of a show we did a long time ago. I mean, back in episode 48 of season 5, we interviewed Ram Sakdev, who's a publisher of Masala magazine, and he talked about the Indian population in Bangkok, which was really interesting. And I've tried for a long time to find someone to talk about the Chinese population and their history in Bangkok. But it's hard. It's hard to find someone who speaks really good English, who wants to come on a podcast and talk about this, who is allowed to come on the podcast and talk about this. So,
it's a tricky question, because I know some Black people in Thailand, but that doesn't mean they represent all Black people, or they want to talk about it. I mean, every person's experience is different. Like I've had my experience, but I don't know if my experience is typical of a white guy. I've got no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. But Indian, Chinese, Muslim, Black, Jewish, all religions, all races, it would be a really interesting insight into, you know, all this crazy patchwork of lifestyles and lives in Bangkok. But yeah, thanks, Kat. We're definitely on it. But it does take some time to put that stuff together. So yeah.
Good idea, though. Good idea.
Yeah,
though. Thank you, Kat.
Thanks for the message.
Okay, a final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping in our never-ending quest for cool content. Find out more by clicking support on our website, and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, baby. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail, just like Kat did, through our website that will feature on the show. You can hit me up on Threads at BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Take it easy out there. Stay dry. And we will see you back here next week.
No doubt. Hello, hello, hello.
There we go. My knee is still hurting, man.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Is it at least getting better on the mend?
Yeah, it's getting better. But I've got a like one of those little old school ice packs you see like from the movies where the mom puts the little ice cube bag on the kid's head. I've got one of those full of ice cubes taped to my knee right now. My entire knee is numb and freezing cold, but I'm not taking it off.
That's great.
Freeze my flesh. See how that goes. Yeah, my knee works, but
You got frostbite.
Frostbite anyway.